Hey guys, Hailey Lain, aka Kia Black here, and for today's episode of Off the Cuff, I'm going to talk a little bit about the animation process for Behind the Curtain. Part of it, at any rate. There's a lot to talk about, like way more than can fit in one single video, so I'm just going to kind of break it up into smaller chunks. And on this one, I just wanted to talk about strictly the 2D animation process, why certain decisions were made and why it ended up looking the way that it did. So for a little bit of background, I am a 2D traditional animator by trade. It's what I specialize in. In Welcome Home, I also did about half the storyboards, I did the directing, I did the final compositing, the video editing and everything. I also composed the music, and I performed as Bendy. But this time, basically we had a full team on Behind the Curtain, so we were able to delegate a lot more effectively, and I was able to focus on my own wheelhouse, which is primarily 2D animation. The first thing is, when we were going into this, we knew that I was going to have to achieve a pseudo Roger Rabbit sort of thing. When you combine 2D animation with 3D animation, or really, 2D animation and live action, 2D animation with 3D, anything like that, the 2D has to maintain the same level of energy as the 3D. And that is, if it stays completely stock still, it's gonna stick out and it's gonna look like a sore thumb in the middle of all this other footage. So with the 3D animation, well, backing up a little bit, in Welcome Home, the 3D animator for Welcome Home did everything at 24 frames per second, after which I went in and did the 2D animation for the expressions on top of everything. It turned out to be a lot more work than was necessary. So we had the Behind the Curtain team instead animate at 12 frames per second, and I would be doing the 2D animation at 12 frames per second as well. So that reduces greatly the number of drawings. We also made sure that the 3D characters had their own expressions built into the models so that I didn't have to go back through and 2D animate all of them. I think it ended up looking a lot more cohesive, especially because Moth did such a great job making sure the models looked properly 2D even in the 3D space. Now granted, the 2D characters still had to look different from the 3D characters, and considering there was only one character who was going to be moving around in 2D this time, the Angel, that was pretty simple. It was literally just a black and white depiction of her. There was no shading or anything. We decided to keep it nice and flat, no detailed background, so you can focus on her very strong silhouettes, and then as she's moving across the screen, we would plan it out so that when one character is moving in 3D, the character in 2D is moving very little, and vice versa, so that nothing that Henry's doing is going to distract from anything the Angel is doing, and the Angel is only going to be moving when you're not meant to be paying more attention to Henry. For instance, when Henry enters the room, first off, you'll notice that he stops abruptly when the audience is supposed to notice that the Angel is moving on the screen right around the time that he does. Then on the stylistic side as well, this isn't exactly in line with the 1930s to 1940s cartoons. I can't achieve rubber hose as well as the greats could back in the day, and obviously my style is veering more anime, but I did my best to try and emulate the feeling of it. So it's not perfect, but when I went into this, I remembered some champion watching Welcome Home noticed that I had used smears in that cartoon, in the 2D animation there, whenever Bendy is swirling around his cane. So this time I'm like, all right, no, they had a point. Smears would not have existed in the 1920s to roughly the 1940s until the cartoon The Dover Boys. Jess has taught me the animation history behind that cartoon's production, but I don't remember exactly what the specifics were. Roughly, though, it's that smears really hadn't been used in cartoons up until that point, and when they were, it was considered kind of weird, like, is this really going to be effective? It was. Basically, a smear is when an object is moving so fast across the screen that it appears smeared across the camera lens. In live-action footage, the equivalent is a motion blur. So, yeah, this time, no smears! Thankfully, though, of course, the Angel is moving so slowly and gracefully that I really didn't have to worry about that to begin with. That being said, there were some unique challenges with animating the Angel this time. I already talked about getting the acting right for the kind of woman that she is, but we were also trying to get certain subtleties in, like I think I would have to say the most difficult shot for me to do was the second to last and the last one that she appears in as a 2D animated character. And Jess was giving me some direction on this, and she was referring me to a lot of Milt Call. And if you guys don't know, Milt Call was a veteran animator for Disney, one of the 9 old men, and in Jess's writing, he was one of the inspirations for Henry Ross's character and personality, who was really, really famous for doing this head swaggle. The head is a really complicated part of the body, and so to move that around in 3D space and have it rotate all around in relation to the camera is really difficult. But of course, with the Angel's personality, she would absolutely be tilting her head towards camera in this very beckoning motion. So not exactly a head swaggle, but the head tilt, nonetheless. I had to achieve the illusion of the rotation of her head using the horns and the curl on her cheeks of her hair. Of course, along with the positioning of her eyes, because her design is so simple, there's no real defined shape to her jaw. It's this very rounded shape. So that was very interestingly challenging. I don't think I'd ever done anything quite like that in animation before. But yeah, it was an interesting balance to strike, making sure that even though the 3D characters are still meant to feel like 2D characters who stepped off the page, she still had to feel like a 2D character who hadn't yet stepped off the page, and yet she would still have to move in the same sort of believability realm as the 3D characters around her. So it was a very fun challenge. I'd like to do something like that again, and not gonna give too much away, but next time we tackle something like this, we do have plans to make it a lot more detailed and in-depth, but we'll have to wait and see on that. At any rate, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. If you guys have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comments, and yeah, I think that about covers it. See you guys. Thanks.